You are watching Access LaPorte County, Channel 97. Coming up next is the March 14th, 2023 meeting of the Michigan City Board of Zoning Appeals. You can find more information for this meeting by visiting www.accesslaportecounty.org.
Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, March 14th, 2023 at 6:04, and this is the regular meeting of the Michigan City Board of Zoning Appeals. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jackson? No. Mr. Jackson?
Present.
Mr. Klender? Miss Stransky?
Present.
Miss Vance?
Present.
Mr. Zimmer?
Present.
And Attorney Steve Hale?
Present.
So is Fred Klinder not present?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sylvia. I marked him as, I thought he was on Zoom.
Okay, I'll fix that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
The next item would be approval of the minutes from the last meeting, but we didn't get any, or did we not get any? Okay, great. So no minutes to approve this month. So that moves us right into our first and only petition this evening. Who would like to speak to that? Introduce, read it.
So we have petition B-100-23, Stephen S. Bingerner. I may be saying that wrong. I do apologize. Carriage House LLC requesting use variance for property at 832 Pine Street, which is a R3B multifamily resident to CBD1 Office Service Center. Do we have a representative here to speak on behalf of this project? Yes.
Okay.
And once you start, can you introduce yourself with name and address?
That's my personal address.
Whichever you choose.
Okay. Steve Igneri and 556 Northview in Valparaiso.
So if you can give us a little an overview of the project.
So on the corner of 8th and Pine, we purchased the building, I believe, in September, and we would like to take that building and convert it into office space, specifically focused on a counseling center. As we went through the building originally, there were a lot of belongings. I think it could safely be considered a hoarder property. So we weren't able to see a lot. And as we uncovered different pieces and aspects of it, the cost and the budget kept climbing. And so I had a friend of mine come over who owns quite a bit of property and have him take a look at it, walk through, and ask him what he thought of it. He has some small office spaces, which they almost act as a business incubator, where like a small lawyer or a counselor or a psychiatrist, or I believe he has, I think I said lawyer, and then like a financial planner. I know he's had massage therapists, different people like that in the space. And so it's just a small office space that somebody is able to rent out, and they're able to have their electric, they're able to have internet, everything taken care of in one place. And so it functions kind of as a business incubator. We talked through it, and he thought it really made sense in that building. In both buildings, both the front building, and then there's the detached dwelling in the back of the carriage house, that it really made sense to convert the space to that, both from a budget standpoint, and then even from the location of where it was over on Pine, just off of the main part of downtown. He thought it was good because and then we came to agree with him because it was very near to the train station, so commuting wouldn't be an issue. There's parking that's nearby. And then being used as a counseling center, it wasn't right on a main street, so that people wouldn't feel uncomfortable. They wouldn't feel stigmatized if they did come to there for whatever the counseling might be, if it was family counseling or if there was addiction counseling or anything like that, they wouldn't feel that stigma that is somewhat still present, even though it's greatly reduced in society today.
Thank you. I will move forward with reading my findings. Report on petition for B100-23 832 Pine Street. This project was circulated to different departments, and the water department came back and had no issues with the request for the use variance. No other departments responded. The planning department. The petitioner is requesting a use variance to allow office space to be developed in a R3B high-rise multifamily residential district. The property is zoned as R3B high-rise multifamily residence. It is required by zoning ordinance section 0.02 that the use is not permitted in this district. Use not listed in the table are not permitted. He is requesting a use variance to allow for an office space to be developed in an R3B high-rise multifamily residence. The city's comment. The current use is established as multifamily residence. The petitioner, however, is proposing to turn the structure into office units, which is only permissible if the petitioner is granted a use variance as established in our zoning ordinance section 22.13. Proposed findings. The standards for a use variance have been set out below in italics in 228.11a with the department's findings as: number one, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, moral, and general welfare of the community. The proposed use of this structure will follow all applicable local and state requirements to transition to the newly proposed use and will not negatively affect the property's value or a community. The proposed use is located across from a CBD1 district, which permits office service centers. The proposed use will continue to align with the existing surrounding permitted uses. Number two, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantial adverse manner. The proposed use is consistent with other uses found in the adjacent properties and will not affect the value or use of the surrounding properties. Number three, the need for the variance does arise from some condition particular to the property involved. Properties along Pine have begun to shift from residential use to office space use over the years. Allowing office space at this location will not interfere with the existing office space and residential use already found along Pine. Number four, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will constitute an unnecessary hardship if applied to the property for which the variance is sought. The structure was originally built as a single-family home with a carriage house connected to the back of the home. Over the years, the property has shifted to several residential uses and has not thrived. The strict application to the zoning code restricts the petitioner from utilizing the property for office space and commercial uses, which has the potential for improving the property and community similar to other houses adjacent to the property and along Pine. Number five, the approval does not interfere substantially with the comprehensive land development plan. Due to the location of the property and the adjacent zoning classification and use, approval of this will not significantly deviate from the comprehensive land development plan and the recommendations used for this area. The department recommends approval of the request use variance docket B100-23 subjected to the following conditions. Number one, the approval use is limited to private business offices for individual and or business entities employing less than 5 employees on site. All use shall be permitted uses under section 07.02 or 8.02 of the Michigan City zoning ordinance under category of office, general and professional with accessory research and testing. In addition, there shall be no special exemption use. There shall be no adult regulated use. Number 3, sales of services is permitted, but not sales of goods is not permitted. There shall be no retail use permitted on the property. Number 4, excessive noise, odor, and emissions are prohibited. Number 5, the provisions set out in paragraph 1 through 4 inclusive shall apply to the owner, the petitioner, and any successor owner, and shall be made a part of any oral or written lease for any office or part of the property. Number 6, the petitioner must follow all applicable regulations and recommendations of the Historic Review Board and the certification of appropriate use, known as the COA. Thank you.
Sylvia, could I ask you to just run through those briefly one more time? Because I didn't quite get the distinguishment between the 6 different ones. Just, you don't have to read them, just tell me. So the first one was private use only, 5 employees or less. No special exception uses, no sales of service only, no retail, no, what was that? No smells?
No excessive noise, odors, emissions are prohibited.
Okay, and what was 5?
Number 5 is the provisions set out in paragraphs 1 to 4 inclusive, which are the questions. Inclusive shall apply to the owner, the petitioner, and the successor, and shall be made part of the oral written lease for any office or part of the property. Basically saying that anybody whom rents or purchase that space has to have this, it has to be in their lease.
Oh, those first 4 items.
Yes.
I see. And then number 6 was Historic Review Board.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Which we have received. They have received their seat.
Oh, and which they have received. So they have their COA and they know the regulations that they should follow. Sorry.
They've already gotten the COA?
Yes.
Yes.
They've already gone through a portion of their historical review.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Hale, we'll hear your report now, please.
Yes, sir. My report for petition number B-100-23, petitioner Stephen Venere, the owner Carriage House LLC. The request is for use variance for the property at 832 Pine Street in Michigan City. Mr. York, Ms. Collins, and I have talked about this petition and the application. We've reviewed the notice documentation, and we've discussed potential conditions. You're free to consider this matter, and the record includes the materials I put in my written report, which you have, but the most important document, I believe, would be the layout and the sketches from the beacon service as to the size and location and outlook of the building itself. Ms. Collins correctly listed for you all the standards that the petitioner must meet and the findings that you must make to grant approval. And I want to point out that we talked about conditions, and the reason for this is that in my memory, we haven't had a blanket approval for a use that is as generic as business offices. And I think we agree that we need some shaping and definition of what is permitted, so that almost anything would otherwise be allowed under that title. So I think the conditions that were fashioned adequately limit this to a more typical use, and prohibit retail and similar uses that wouldn't fit in this neighborhood and wouldn't fit for the parking in the area. Because Ms. Collins has put those conditions in her report, I think that if you're going to consider this matter for approval, you want to address those conditions. So in concluding, I would say that you may grant this request as set out in the petition. You may partially grant the request or grant it with limitations, or you may grant the request but subject to certain conditions, such as those included in Ms. Collins' report, or you may deny the request or table it until a future meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. Questions and comments from commissioners? Board members, any?
I thought there was a limit to how many offices could be in a building,
So,
according to city code.
so keep in mind, this is simply a drawing. We're only proving use tonight. He still has to go through the state, or that because it's a total change. You're totally changing a use. You're going from residential use to a commercial. Well, office is a commercial use. We're not retailing from it, but it's a commercial use. So you still got to go through the state for the CDR, and that's really going to determine, okay, how many units can you have? Because it's going to be based upon fire code, sprinkling, sprinklers. There's a lot more involved in it, and then that comes to us, and then Sue will get involved in it at that point in time. I don't know that you're going to get 12 units out of that. Probably maybe five or six. I don't know, but I'm not the one that's going to be telling you that. It's going to be the state, the fire code. It's going to have it's going to have a capacity code, things of that nature. And it's meant for that purpose. You have to have ingress, egress. All those things have to be met. So there's more to this than just our approval. Ours is a use approval. Do we want that use there? Is it appropriate use there? When it comes to the actual building itself, that's a whole different thing. But that's why we also included the Historic Review Board application in there, because it has been granted. That's why we included it. So it's like, if you do grant this use, well, it can't deviate from that either. It's still gotta look like a house, and from the exterior, which I think is what the Historic Review Board granted.
Yes, and we tried to put a range in there to reflect that, because we know that everything here is contingent on state, local building approval and all of that. And actually, one of the aspects of when my friend's name is John, when John walked in and saw it, he said one of the aspects of that this would be good as a counseling center or professional offices is that it looks like a house, so people feel more comfortable going there, because it does have the appearance it does.
And we also did recommend at number 1, where we recommended that the approval use is limited to employees of less than 5, meaning that we don't want 20, 30, 40 employees or structures. I mean, that's what I recommend. I'm recommending 5. But like Mr. York stated, that if he goes and submit for it, it can be less, it can be more. And then it'll come back to us again after the state regulations are, kind of looked at in a different perspective. But from my recommendations, that's what from my perspective, and that's contingent upon what you guys determine.
And those are our intentions as well, is small businesses. So for the most part, a single operator, possibly a partnership, maybe up to 3 parties, but usually it's a single operator. It's a single counselor coming in. And so it's not meant to be for large entities, large public offices. It is a small business incubator or a counseling center. Either one of those would be the proposed or the intended use.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I just want to go back to what you said about the 5, when that ties in. Are you saying 5 in each of the areas, or are you limiting it? Were you limiting it to the 5?
It's for the entire parcel.
Okay.
It's for both structures. It's for the main structure, because they're petitioning for the whole parcel, which consists of the main structure and the detached dwelling, which is what he stated, but it's considered a carriage house, but it's a detached dwelling as we know it. So it's taking into consideration the whole entire property, not just the front structure and not just the back structure, but both structures.
Okay.
I'm still confused by that though. So he's showing us a layout, and I know it's just schematic, for 16 offices. And now you're saying that there's only going to be 5 people.
No.
So clarify this for me.
So what we're clarifying is that he still has to go to the state, and the state's, I highly doubt they're going to approve 16 offices there. It's just it's too much. You guys could limit that if you wanted to right now. But what this statement says is that right now they can have less than 5 employees. So what he's saying is each one of those offices is only going to have 1 employee renting it. That's what this is saying. That's what this statement's saying. Now, if you guys wanted to regulate the number of offices in the buildings, I believe you could regulate that if you would like to, if you wanted to. It's kind of at your, but we don't know until the state weighs in and says, here's what is going to be allowed, because it's a fire code issue at that point in time. We don't want to put anything in there and say, yeah, you can do 20 offices, and then they come back and be like, well, you can only get 5.
Okay.
Then we have basically, we would have to probably amend our.
So what I think we need to do is we need to step back and say, like you said, do we want to change the zoning on this from residential to, small commercial? And I guess I'm kind of surprised you guys approved this, because I was really thinking that this is a house. We need housing units in the city. Everybody keeps talking about that. I don't understand why we're not seeing this renovated into like 2 or 3 apartments for rent rather than commercial space.
As I read in my report, this property has gone through maybe 7 different residential uses over the years. It's gone from single family to multifamily to just multiple residentials, and it has not thrived.
But that doesn't mean that there's not a need for it.
I wasn't.
Sorry.
I understand that. So as you notice, when structures they're not viable or they're not successful in that area, we're not changing the zoning. So let's step back there. We're talking about a use. It still will be zoned as residential. But we're just changing the use of it. The use is different between changing the use and changing the zone. We wouldn't be changing the zone here anyway. So we're just changing the use of it. So instead of it only being able to be used as residential, it can be used as an office space. And that's the use. It's not commercial. It can't go into a business. It can't, turn into a store or something of that nature. It can only be used for the use that we select. If we select this today, we felt that after reviewing that it may be more successful and more valuable to be a different use than its existing past uses. Skylar, if you want to touch on it.
Yeah, I was just going to add in that you're adding a use into the category. So it's still zoned residential, still multifamily. It doesn't change that. It's not change the zoning. So say he goes to the state and the state comes back and says, hey, you got to sprinkle this. So you're only going to get one unit out of it or something like that. He may go back and say, I'm going to put a office in the bottom and have a living space above it or something of that nature. It allows a little bit more flexibility with that use. Does that make, I mean, that's kind of how I looked at it, is to say it's adding a use to make it a little bit more viable, if you will. Like they could mix the use then at that point in time, or the back to stay as a residential. You're just expanding that opportunity to do something a little different there. That's how I look at it. The zoning is still the same, and those uses still exist. So he may come back and say, hey, office, we're only going to get one there, two there. We're going to stick with residential in the back and put a residential above it.
And who is this at the state, and what do they use as their guidelines?
They're going to use whatever he draws up as their guidelines, and then they're going to come back and say, you're going to have to do X, Y, and Z. And then it's a matter of economics at that point in time. But you're talking about the Department of Homeland Security. Yeah.
One more question. I understand now where you're limiting it to the 5. So and he was thinking maybe they would only get 4. But if they get more than that, does he now have to come back and to us again then and ask to raise it up past that 5? Or is that something that we maybe should have put in there yet? Or
I mean, I wouldn't probably, if they come back and say you can only, I mean, I don't know that I would want more than that there.
okay.
So.
Am I correct in my interpretation of the 5 is that I can't go here and say that we go to Verizon and Verizon rents and we get approved for all 20 offices through the state. And we say, fine, what we're going to do is we're going to put cubicles into all of these offices. And in each office, there's going to be 5 different people in cubicles sitting there. So over these 20 offices, there's going to be 100 people in the building. Like you're trying to prevent a large public and just overbuilding. Okay.
It's compounded. It's overbuilding. It's overparking. It's a lot. You still got a neighborhood there that has predominantly on-street parking.
Right.
So you want to protect them. So there's a balance to it. I feel.
And you also have a very old building, and structurally, being in a historic district, it has different regulations. So there's multiple avenues that that may potentially restrict even the 5. Because this isn't the only board that they will have to follow the regulations for or obtain approval for.
And just so you know, I did talk to the building commissioner, showed them the layouts. I mean, she's pretty much highly doubtful to get that many units in there. Just she knows what the state's going to do.
Okay.
It's still an old house for that matter, and it's a complete change of use. So it may come back and be more viable for them to do residential above and have 1 unit, of office.
Mr. Jackson.
And our decision took the building commissioners her advice into consideration. We didn't just decide, we kind of had those different conversations. And that's where the 5 came up at.
Okay, thanks.
Can we say 5 and no cubicles or no sub?
I would defer to Mr. Hale, but I believe you could if they put more additional restrictions on it.
Certainly, you may put any condition you feel is appropriate on the approval. So if you wanted to change a number, you certainly have the power and authority to do that.
But I don't know if I might say something. Since you said the 5, I don't think we're going to need to put in there no cubicles because we're not talking more than 5. So, and in the whole structure. So I don't think we would have to.
What I think
Right.
Kathy did too is she's saying no more than, sorry.
I'm sorry, Drew. I would say Kathy's talking more about this one is more about employees, where Kathy's saying no more than 5 units, office spaces, period. And then and then you're right, this still controls employees in those units. Does that make, am I correct interpreting that? Yeah.
Because this is as far as we can recommend. So this is what we have here is as far as that as we can go. But as Mr. Hale stated, you know, you guys have the freedom to put recommendations as well.
I will say if we go the direction of 5 on the site, it's not going to be financially viable. So there has to be a certain threshold. We want to add to the community, but 5 isn't going to be financially viable. And hopefully we're not added to the long line of people who've tried to do something at that property and haven't been able to at that point.
But you have to realize this board also has to consider the neighborhood, the people, the buildings around it,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just,
than just your building. It's everybody that lives there and the school across the street, everything.
and I totally understand and appreciate that. Just wanting to make sure that it is clear from our end, 5 offices isn't going to produce any, it's not going to be viable at that point.
Okay, so
Mr. Zimmer,
Yes, sir.
may I ask Mr. Veneri a question?
Yes.
Mr. Veneri, have you considered what would be viable? Do you have any sort of a financial plan that you have to follow or meet to turn a profit?
If we're able to do 4 on the main level, 4 on the second level, 4 in the detached dwelling, so 12 units altogether, that's the line.
Mr. Zimmer, if I may, please.
Yes, you may.
Okay.
Mr. Dash.
So this is where I'm going with this. All right, we're saying at one point 5 employees for the property. I understand that. If you had, let's say it turned into, I'm just throwing this out there, a doctor's office, a therapy, a counseling center. You have 5 employees there. Those 5 employees have appointments all day long with people. So now you've got added traffic that's coming in and out. You've got 5 employee cars that are now parking on the street. Now these people that are coming in, we're going to say there's another 5 at a time that's coming in, just for, you know.
Well, Mr. Jackson, maybe for argument's sake, use 12 because that's what he's shooting for.
Well, even at 5, if he has 5 employees, 5 patients coming in. As those patients are coming in and they're leaving, other ones are already trying to find a place to park. The second block of Ninth Street on the south side, right off the bat, directly across the street is a 4-unit apartment complex. I just drove through there and started counting. So then you go down to the next house, which literally the guy was outside and I asked him, they've just taken a multi-family home and turned it into a single family home. But if you go past that, there's even more multi-family homes down there. And you can tell by the mailboxes on it, the amount of air conditioners on the side of the building, the whole bit. So parking wise, 9th Street, you're not going to get very much. Then if you turn around and get on Pine Street, you have a house that's right next door. I think it's vacant. But if somebody wanted to move into that and they go and literally they look at this house, or if a person bought the house, fixed it up, sold it, or there may be people living there right now, I don't know. But literally, who wants to go home every day and have to fight for a parking spot to find some place to park? Now, on the other side of that house is an empty lot. If that empty lot was turned into a parking spot, then I would say there wouldn't be hardly any issues with the amount of people coming and going. But parking is going to be a big deal. The wintertime, Part of that's a snow route. So then where are they going? You've still got businesses. You still got customers that are going to come into these businesses. They have to have places to park. So, and I don't mean to rain on anybody's parade, but that's just with five employees, 5 customers there. As those 5 customers are leaving, more are coming in. So now you've already picked it up to at least 15 cars. And that's just with 5. Now, if my math is wrong, just bear with me, but I'm using this as, I guess, an extreme with just 5. If you went with 12, you could possibly have 36 cars trying to find a place to park if it was all going full blast.
Yeah, I did print this out in can I hand these?
Yeah.
Because I looked at I knew that would probably be a concern even with it being in the historical district. So I did go and look. So what's in blue there is either what is directly in front of the property, or the other spots that you'll see that are the long blue rectangles are vacant properties. And then also the Elston Grove parking, that's also marked on there. So that's within a block of it. So we don't think that it should impede the neighborhood. And again, we want to be a good neighbor. And there seems to be a good fair amount of parking, and there's an virtually unused parking lot in Elston Grove. I drove by there, and today there were 0 cars there. For a long time there was a white Lincoln Town Car that appeared to be abandoned in there. So it's been a fairly unused parking lot. And so if we, for example, said that anybody who is part of the lease could be that they have to use that parking lot, and so that would greatly reduce it. There could be, we're fine with whatever we need to do. And then as far as the 5 employees, if somebody had 5 employees, they would probably need 5 of those offices. It's not going, we're not planning on it being like a doctor's office where there's a receptionist out front and then the receptionist lets somebody in and then somebody sees somebody else where it's almost exclusively a single person in each office. And if it's not a single person, they most likely wouldn't be there in there at the same time. Does that clarify that at all, or?
Well, it's all speculation at this point. You're saying one thing, but we have to assume worst case scenario. That's what we have to plan for.
And we can put in there that that's how it needs to be for professional offices, and that there can be no more occupancies. And then we have to make sure that we abide by the fire code and all of that as well. So we're open to that.
So are you gonna go out there and check the cars that are parking to see if they belong to our residents or if they belong to your people that are parking on the streets? I can see that being a real issue in that neighborhood. That's a very busy area.
What's your hours of operation?
Hours of operation.
The hours of operation are normal business hours, 9 to 5. There may be some people who do prefer, if they're getting counseling, to be after hours. So there might be some traffic after hours, but that would be that we could regulate that and make sure that that was clear and abide by whatever is needed.
Mr. Zimmer, if I may.
Yes.
Sir, you've mentioned counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And you've said counseling multiple times tonight. Have you already got somebody lined up to put in counseling there, and what kind of counseling will it be?
We've talked to a few people, and there's been overflow. So there would be some family counseling. Family counseling and addiction counseling is mostly what we've had. The people that we've talked to who've expressed the need to expand.
Okay.
So you're gonna have 5 offices And you're gonna have cubicles within them offices that the people work out of?
No, no,
Is
no.
that what you're saying?
No cubicles.
Okay.
The cubicles was an example of what we are not going to have, not what we are going to have. Sorry for discombobulating it.
Maybe you've already talked about all this with the Historic Review Board, but can you talk a little bit about what your plans are for fixing up the building and then specifically, how would you address signage?
Signage, we would have to abide by whatever the ordinances are. But I mean, most likely, we're not going to be able to have anything that's elevated on a post. It most likely won't even be lighted, I would think. I would guess that in a building like that, at most, we'd be able to have a shingle, but most likely the signage is just going to be lettering on a door. Would be my guess, with perhaps a shingle style that's 48 inches high, 60 inches high, something like that. That just a board that says maybe Carriage House Professional Offices or something like that, Carriage House Counseling Center, something like that.
And so what are the plans that you've got the COA on? What did you just briefly outline what you're talking about?
Sure. So the COA, we are replacing all the windows. There was a fire in between us petitioning and now. And so we've gone through and we've demoed from the fire. But replacing all the windows, now a roof repair is going to be part of that. Actually, I believe a roof repair is on the COA, but completing that, and then the siding, repairing the existing cedar siding, repainting that, and then as far as the detached dwelling goes, refurbishing the exterior. There's a lot of peeling paint, and there's also some structural issues there. So repairing those and repainting it. I don't think I left anything out there, but
Windows.
replacing all the windows, yes.
So the exterior shell of the building is what the COA applies to, not what you do on the inside.
Correct.
So what are your thoughts about how you would do the interior of the house? Are you going to just make it look like offices, or is it going to have a certain level of appropriate look and charm of the building, of the house on the inside, or is it going to just be real modern, or what?
So the second floor is what was damaged, and so in the fire. So the second floor, most likely, we would like to. It has a beautiful staircase that was in place. We're hoping to restore that. It was already in. It already needed repair when we came in, but we'd like to restore that because it's a beautiful element of it. But then, so the second level would appear more like offices, but then the main level, we have kept as much of the trim as was salvageable and plan to keep the trim. There's some huge oak 8-foot pocket doors that come together, so we're hoping to keep everything that we can. All the interior trim on the windows we plan on keeping, but yeah, the historical. The COA is for the exterior use, but we do plan on keeping as much of the historical elements as we can. We are trying to keep it feeling as homey as possible. It's not, we don't want to go in there and have bright white down hallways and carpet tiles, and it's going to be as homey as we can make it feel.
And have you already engaged the services of an architect or designer to help you on this?
So we've talked to an architect, but we were waiting to see. So this sketch again is us just going into program, putting it, here's kind of the idea, and then going from there. But we've talked to a couple of architects. I've talked to Roger here in town, and then Don Duncan from DHW. I believe he's in, not Westville. Yes, he is in Westville. So yes, short answer, yes. Officially, no.
And do you have any idea what this is going to cost? You don't have to give a number, but have you given the serious thought about what this project is going to cost you, and are you able to finance it?
Yes, we are. So that's actually one of the dividing points where it came down to coming and seeing what we were able to do, because as we got into the residence, there were going to be 4 different apartments, a studio, a 2-2, and a 3-2 on the main level, and then a 2-1 in the detached dwelling. And so as the cost started to mount, then there were budget concerns, and how can we actually make this happen and actually be a viable project? That's when we brought John in. We talked to several different people, talked to the architect, and that's when we decided to bring this and see if we could make this happen. And so short answer, yes, and there's a long answer as well.
Okay. Because, there's always the risk here, and I'm sure you know this too, that, you're going to invest this money and then you're going to reconfigure the inside and make these offices, and then you're going to go under, or it's not going to work, or people aren't going to rent them, and then what's going to happen? Now we've got a house that's carved up into offices, and who's going to want to buy it now and try and make it a residence, without tearing up the inside again? And I mean, I know how much stuff costs, and it's just, I think you got to take this very carefully and sincerely.
Absolutely. The cost of bringing it back to up to snuff as far as a residence goes is greater than the cost is to do commercial. And as I mentioned, I've talked about my friend. I don't know if any of you know John Clumpy, but John does. He has at least 3 buildings that he's done in this manner, and his occupancies are at 100%. And he has already talked to a few of his tenants, and a few of his tenants would be coming on board. And then as well, he said that he would help and facilitate making it happen to make sure that we do have enough in the building to make it financially viable. So we're not just, so it's not just an albatross. And one thing that we've talked about, Sylvia, I don't know if we talked about this or not, but was leaving the detached dwelling as a detached dwelling for now, so that we're not taking the risk to a greater level. That back dwelling is actually already plumbed for a residence, and so it had a hallway through the middle, and then there was a kitchen. There's a kitchen, a bedroom, a kind of front room, and then another bedroom, which would easily convert to a hallway, office, but could easily also just be left as a residence. And then that count of offices goes down. We get a proof of concept, make sure it actually works. And then as long as it actually works, then we could come back and just turn that hallway back into a hallway. Right now, it's just going to be laundry. So it has a space for a washer and dryer and a closet. And so the closet, just the back of it would open up, and then it's a hallway again. So that could also be something that would work and would lower the risk.
So that it's interesting that you said that, because my thought was, I wonder if, as you're designing this, you could think about the layout of the first and second floor of the main house as lay it out as a residence, but those rooms of the residence, living room, dining room, bedroom, kitchen, whatever, are your offices. So if the office concept doesn't work out, you just pull out, and then the configuration of the rooms is there to make it a residence,
right? Without
having to totally reconstruct the interior.
Right. So we can put up partition walls that don't go all the way up into the drywall, don't go up all the way into the joist, things like that. So the partitions are separating. And again, we've got to look at fire code and make sure that's acceptable. But as long as it is, then yes, we can leave the layout specifically on the main level as exactly what you're describing. The second level is just a wide open gut at this point. And as we walked through it with Sue, we did actually find that it appears that at some point, and maybe even originally, it was offices, because there are several different entrances. There are doors with transoms that don't have adjustments, so they likely weren't residential. The front room had its own fireplace, and again, those big oak doors that locked off had a separate entrance from the exterior into that room. And then you walk down the hallway and you would walk into the right side, which was another space that was divided off. And then the left side also had its own entrance. So and I don't know how much, we couldn't find this, but we were told that it was originally built by one of the partners for Ton and Blank, and that's who the original builder was. We weren't able to verify that, but after walking through it with Sue, it may have actually originally been used largely in offices, maybe as a combination mixed use, but it does appear that there were, at least at one point, there were definitely offices in there. How it was utilized, if it was mainly used as a home or mainly used as offices, that's speculation. And of course, trying for this, I'm like, oh, of course we were all offices originally, but there were definitely offices. How it was utilized, I don't know.
Is there a full basement?
It's not high enough. There is a full basement front to back. It's not high enough to be able to be utilized as living or functional space, though.
Well, I guess, are there any other questions, comments? All right, so at this point, I'll open it up to public comment. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address this petition and speak? Please come up to the podium, state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Adrienne Cook, and I live at 700 Pine Street, and I own 700 Pine and the house at 714 and 16 Pine, and the lot in between those two houses. And so I have a question first, but then I have some comments. My question is, what has been passed already? Somebody mentioned that something has been passed already regarding this.
The Historic Review Board has reviewed his plans for the renovation of the house.
Oh, yeah.
And they've issued their what's called a COA, which is a certificate of appropriateness.
Yeah, I know what that is. Yeah, that's for the outside of the house. Okay.
That's the only thing so far.
Right. Because a couple of things. First is that in order to get this variance, a certified letter is required for notice for the neighbors. The first thing is that I received from the address of a law firm at 57 Michigan Avenue, Suite 101, Valparaiso, what was supposed to be a certified letter. I received it like this without any notice card. So I went to the post office and asked to see the card, the signature card. They showed it to me. I have a copy of it here with my forged signature on it, which naturally raised my antenna about what's going on with this issue. So the attorneys who sent this, the law firm address that is on the address for this is Carr, Chalovich, Skadberg, and Kazimierzak LLC, and that's the return address that's on here that sent the certified letter. So I have filed a complaint with the Inspector General of the U.S. Postal Service because a forgery is a criminal offense. So this also notified me that there's something going on here. So that's not proper notice, and they haven't noticed the neighbors, any other neighbors who might have gotten that kind of notice. So that made me wonder what's going on here. In addition, that the thing that really bothers me about this whole thing sitting here tonight is that it's vague. The entire thing is half-baked in, every question you've asked this gentleman has been answered with, we could do this, we could do that. Here's my parking survey. Pine Street, as somebody mentioned, is a snow route in the wintertime. As you mentioned, there's a school right across the street where there are parents coming for meetings, parents dropping off, picking up kids. The whole neighborhood has parking issues. I don't know where this alleged parking lot is in Elston Grove. Somebody maybe can tell me where that would be.
It's a block to the north. There's that where the Elston Grove sign is. There's a parking lot there.
I thought that belonged to AT&T. It's public now? Okay. Okay. Well, I guess if we can force people to walk and park there, that would be good. But it's my experience that people want to park exactly in front of the residence or the office where they're going in Michigan City. They're not willing to walk very far. So the thing for me is when I hear up to 12 offices or, office spaces, maybe, with 5 employees, I don't know how 12 offices could be manned by 5 employees. That's the first thing. It's not realistic. It's pie in the sky. And like I say, it's half baked. And I think the biggest problem here is that this is not ripe for decision at this point because there's so much confusion. Nothing is set in stone. There's no real plan. Nothing has been clearly answered here. Now you brought up the point about the property values. I don't think there's been a real consideration for the neighborhood, the property values. Mr. Vigneri here mentions about counseling and how there is some kind of, people don't like it maybe if there are people who are addicted coming into the neighborhood or drug addiction centers, that kind of thing. Well, it may affect the property values whether we like it or not. Maybe it shouldn't, but it does. So we need to know if that's going to be the case. Will they house people overnight to dry them out, perhaps? If this is residential and, we need to know that. There needs to be a real plan before anybody makes a decision, because if this thing is allowed and there are 12 units and we just say, go ahead, it'll be too late. We need to know, and we need to we deserve to have a real plan in place. And, I just think that doing it too fast is not a wise thing to do. And I would like to have some answers about the notice requirements. That's about all I have to say.
Can I see your notice requirement?
Sure. This was the letter, the envelope. I got the same letter everyone else did on the inside. And this is a photocopy from the postmaster. It's a copy of the notice that someone signed my card because I didn't receive one. And that's what made me curious about this right off.
Do you have anything to have your signature?
Yeah, I have my
sign.
Well, I don't want to sign it. I'll sign something. I'll sign it on a piece of paper. I have my driver's license. I have my passport. Okay. I'll show you that.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? And I have any number of, bank cards or anything else if you want to see my signature. That is not it.
So when you received this, this card was gone?
Mhm. And the only other person is David Van Fleet, my spouse, who lives at our residence. So no one else could have signed that. So that's a crime. So, and since it came from this address, it's that law firm. So I think it.
Okay. Thanks for your comments. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Did I get all my?
Yes, I gave him back to you.
Anybody else with public comment? Okay.
Yeah, this is Tommy Kolovic from 1316 Ohio Street. I want to read this Facebook article from the Michigan City Fire Department. It was posted on February 10th. On February 7th, Michigan City Fire Department was dispatched to a structure fire at a vacant home on Pine Street. The first engine arrived on scene to heavy smoke and fire on the second floor. The fire was brought under control, and upon a secondary search, a homeless person was discovered on the second floor. Life-saving procedures were implemented until EMS arrived. The patient was transported to Lutheran Burn Center in Fort Wayne with inhalation burns. One firefighter suffered a minor injury from a fall during the rescue. The cause of the fire is under investigation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Tommy. You're next, please.
Good evening, and thank you for listening to me. My name is Janet Toyra, Toyra -Smith. I live at 408 East 8th Street. I did know the original keeper of that home before this fire, and she had a lot of problems, but I've been inside the building. It was very nice at one time. I did get a certified letter, also the same thing as what the other lady's talking about. And I signed it right there in front of the postman, and he took it back. So everything was fine. So I'm sure the card on mine is just fine. But when I got the letter, I just wanted to know what kind of offices are going to be in there. And since you mentioned counseling offices, I don't know business-wise whether they're required to have licenses or be licensed even to do the counseling, the type of counseling that they're going to be doing. So I think that would be another thing that should be questioned for the sake of the business community. I'm a former member of the Main Street Association. I had to do the same thing this gentleman is doing when I applied for a variance on the house at 402 East 8th Street, which was our bed and breakfast. It's the 1866 historic key lock house. But at that time, when we came in to talk to you people, I'm not sure if you're the group that's an appellate group as opposed to the board that actually, there's a board of regular zoning, and there were a lot of people on it, and we had to go to the board of zoning in order to get my variance for a bed and breakfast at that time. And we provide probably 8 or 10 color sheeted packets for every one of you to see how we were going to handle parking and everything else. And that's what I was thinking was going to be presented tonight. But what concerns me, this is in jello. It's not even in soft concrete yet. The plans are just not able to be voted on, yes or no, as to what you can do with this. I have several issues. One was the counseling. The parking is a very large issue. I do live in Elston Grove. I'm on 8th Street. And since they've had the train problems and actually put some of the other streets closed and we've had to use 8th Street, it's like a State and Madison back in Chicago time. I mean, there's people racing, they don't pay attention to stop signs or anything else. It's really been a zoo for us. So you're going to be 1 block away and there is no parking anywhere. But we have another counseling area in Elston Grove. It is on 6th Street, and it is a building that is just 2 buildings off of Pine Street, and they have an exorbitant problem with parking. It's on 6th and Pine, and people are parking. Fortunately, there's a field right yet, but that is going to be developed into buildings. The field won't be there then. But just from looking at that issue with the people, and they are there night and day, and it's extremely difficult to even make the intersection and go across Pine Street and continue on 6th Street because of all the parking of the cars. You have to look at the parking, you really do. The license, and why the Historic Review Board takes care of mainly the exterior of the building. They don't care what you do inside, but it does have to be usable and safe. And I ran into, different things that we had to make sure that were really fine, because we had only a 4-room bed and breakfast in a house that had 18 rooms. Well, we also lived there, but you have to have so many accommodations. You're going to have offices. You're going to have extra restrooms. You're going to have a lot of, you'll have to meet the state requirements on the footage for the offices for a person to be in there, particularly for a person who has issues, whether they're mental or physical or whatever they are. So I really wish you as a board would deny this request until it becomes more solidified, because right now it's in soft jello. And I don't see how you can make decisions on it. Thank you for your attention.
Great. Thank you for your comments.
Good evening.
Any other public comment?
Jesse Cundiff, 731 Franklin Street. I just had a question. Is Carriage House in Michigan City any affiliation with the Carriage House Counseling Center in Fort Wayne and the Clubhouse Indiana program? Because you keep talking about counseling and things, and that's what they do. And it piqued my curiosity when I started looking into it, and there's a Carriage House for the Clubhouse program also. And I don't think the parking is a bad issue, and I just think that's a bad precedent when you start turning historical homes in a historic district into offices.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Public comment? Anybody else? Is there anybody else watching? Oh, okay. No? Okay.
My name is Victor Solano, 215 East 9th Street. So on the corner of 9th and Pine right there, there's a 2-unit apartment, which is gentleman over there. So there's 2 units. Next to that, there's the 4-unit, I think the one you saw. Next to that, there's my 4-unit. There's 10 units right there. It's a lot of, there are a lot of cars. So, excuse me, I'm not used to speaking in front of people. But at any rate, we struggle for parking quite a bit there. And as far as it not being successful in the past, the house was in really bad shape. I've got a few units in Michigan City. If you fix them up, people will rent them. So I think that's about all I have to say. So thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Okay, if there's no more public comment and there's nobody else online that wants to comment, then the public comment period is closed. Do any of the board members have any other comments about this petition? Pro or con?
Mr. Zimmer,
Yes, sir.
may I make a comment?
Yes.
I have 2 major comments. First, it strikes me from listening to the concerns of the board that if there were to be any motion to include conditions, the conditions regarding 5 employees might be better served by having a limitation for each building as to the number of offices, with the number of employees that could be working out of each office, and that would clarify those issues. Next, my second comment is you always have the ability to require the petitioner to provide additional information on issues that you consider to be both important and pertinent. And of course, the petitioner himself can seek to have this matter continued while he tries to find or does provide information regarding any of those issues. Those are my comments.
Very well taken. Thank you, Mr. Hale. I think I agree with all of the comments so far. I think that everything is too loosey-goosey right now. I think we need to get more concrete plans, and I think we need to better understand what this whole proposal is going to look like. One other thing that occurred to me that you're going to have to incorporate somewhere is accessibility. You know, you're going to have a ramp into the building in some way, and the second floor would not be accessible. So I don't know if the state is going to require you to put an elevator in. Any of that could all be impacting the look and appearance of this building. And I don't know. I'm very doubtful. Any other comments?
If I might.
Yes.
I feel like we're kind of going way out over more than what we actually as a board are here to do. So I know from what Skylar said, we are here only for use. What then the petitioner will have to do then is to go out to the other areas and provide everything that they need. We can't dictate that here. So we just have to be willing to let him then go to the next level, go to the state, because as he said, there may be things they may find out that they can't do what they want to do. So but I don't believe he'll be able to move past that into the next level if we don't. At least the usage part. We're not changing anything else. We're just allowing him now to move to the next level, work with the state, if I'm correct, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, I mean, he has to go to the state, and the ADA things. Those are things that those are yet more limiting things. Like, you know, okay, an elevator on average, even one story, is $100,000. You know, for that,
yeah,
it's very expensive. And even then, it has to get approved by the historic review board to even go there.
Right.
So if you can't provide that, then you may not be able to do what you want to do upstairs. There's these.
Right, I understand that, but I'm hesitant to say yes to something.
My next question is this: do you want him? Have you made your decision? I guess my question. I don't know how to word this. Do you want him to continue and come back with more information to solidify, find a solution for parking, or is it?
Well, can we ask
I think that's why Steve made his comments. So I guess I would just.
Mr. Zerr,
yes,
if I may.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just talking for myself. Okay. First of all, the idea that there's so many different ways it can go, and it's all going to depend. He's literally here because this is the first step to move on for anything. So to say that nothing's in concrete, nothing's set in stone, he can't set any plans in stone because he's waiting on us. But as for me, myself, I'm not prepared to make a motion to approve, but I also don't want to make a motion to deny. So what I would like to see the gentleman get with the planning or the zoning department with Skylar, Sylvia, maybe even if there's questions for Mr. Hale, get them involved. But that's just me. I don't want to see it dropped, but at the same point, I'm not ready to move forward.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, and just to touch on it, what I've noticed here is that there's a large concern for parking and moving the housing structure on the inside, right? So those are some of the concerns. And this is just for my clarification. So I make sure if you continue it, what we need to look into more.
I would think for my part of it, parking is a huge issue, but at the same point, we have to be able to work with the gentleman because he has a threshold of how much he needs to make on this in order to make it viable. If he can't make it viable, then we're going to sit with an empty shell again for a while until we figure out the next step. So parking is an issue. I would say how many units, how many employees are going to be there on the whole property, not just in one of the buildings or the other building. But those two things to me is concerns that we need to figure out. And then if other board members have other thoughts or ideas, then that would be them.
So he can sit here actually and agree with us 100%, 5 offices, 1 person in office and so on. But if he gets a manager or he gets a partner, how do we know that that will stay in effect?
Well, go ahead.
Well, once, just like the next portion of our project is, the Board of Zoning Appeals is the finding and orders. And he'll have to have that registered with the county. So it'll be documented in the county as far as the use. And go ahead.
Kathy, are you referring to, okay, we approved 5 units. He comes in with a plan for 10. We would look at we always go back to we know we had a variance. We would have to say, nope, you can only build 5 or whatever's there. That controls it. We do that with all of your variances, any type of use, special. We absolutely look at like what you guys require. It is the law at that point in time. It is a recorded law. It takes precedence over the zoning if you even manipulate it from that.
And as well as when they are constructing of course, inspection and the building inspector, we're all in the same department. So what we determine here as a team, they also follow those same guidelines as well. They won't deviate from what was approved here.
And then any other subsequent change in the use. So someone mentioned staying overnight. How do we know someone's not? You won't be able to do that. That's so having a counseling service with overnight stay, so like a halfway house, a homeless shelter, things. Those are a completely different category of uses. That's the eleemosynary uses, sometimes how they're called. Those are completely different uses at that point in time. We're simply talking about day use of office. Yeah.
And we even document it so that it won't just randomly become a hair salon or a pop-up shop and things of that nature. That's a different use, and that's not allotted in any of this as well.
Skylar,
Yeah.
Or I guess I should ask the petitioner. So what are you going to take to the state now? Where does that, because why can't we just say, we're going to just, like Mr. Jackson said, we're not ready to deny, but we're not ready to approve. But I think if we had more information, more solidified information, like the approval from the state, that might lend some credence to that, because then we'll have their input and we'll know, and he'll know whether this is even viable or not.
May I?
Sure.
I kind of think I know where you're going. The state's gonna require him to get a stamped set to go down there. So that would be an architect or engineer, someone like that. I would suggest that Sue could probably provide a pretty well-rounded, because we actually override. We have home rule rights here. So even if so we can kind of change their documents to some extent. But she actually has, she's going to know what they're going to approve based upon whether or not you sprinkle the building, you have ADA accessibility. we deal with that all the time. So Sue might be the better person to guide. And then at that one time, okay, yeah, this is what's going to get approved by the state. Does that make sense?
So you're saying that you're not gonna go and have an architect start designing a set of drawings for
That's his decision.
but not without our approval, right?
I don't know that. That's a question for the petitioner. But that was just a suggestion to get Sue involved because she would be.
Well, can we hear from the petitioner then about that? What is your next step then? After this? Come up to the microphone.
Our next step would be to bring an architect on board and have them involved in the planning. Our impression of this meeting was, is this a viable idea? Again, can we, according to all state, city, local, everything as far as that goes, what do we need to do? What do we need to take to the state? What do we need to take to an architect? Because as far as engaging an architect, that's a fairly large capital output. And if it's not going to be viable and it's not going to be allowed in the first place, there's no reason to engage, at least not in that manner. And so we'd have to figure out from there. So what we were looking from here is this a viable idea? Is this something we can move forward with as an idea? And then if we hit another roadblock, which we very much could, I don't remember who mentioned the cost of an elevator, the cost of a sprinkler system. If we hit one of those roadblocks, like this is one of several roadblocks. And so if we cross one hurdle, we still have other hurdles or speed bumps, whatever you want to call them, that we have to make sure that we pass muster, that we fulfill all of those obligations before we actually move forward with the plan. So I appreciate and I understand that there is an element of jello to this, but it's been because to engage an architect, to take anything to state, we're just not at the point where that would have been viable. And so coming up here and saying this is exactly what we're going to do. We'd like to make it professional offices. Outside of that, though, we can't. We're dictated to by committees. And
so is it conceivable then that maybe you could go and hire an architect to do phases of work? So you don't have to ask for a full-blown set of drawings, but how about engaging an architect to do a more accurate set of schematics than this?
Okay.
Because you said you needed 12 units. So maybe come back to us with a schematic layout that show, including the coach house, what your 12 unit conceptually would look like, and show as much detail as you can within the existing footprint of the structure. I know that's a capital output, but it's not as much as going the full blown route.
Right, that's
have a little bit more to work with here.
Yeah, we have a relationship, and I think that could be viable to where we just get the footprint laid out, and then from there, then we'd get the engineering drawings and all of that. So
I think we still are struggling though with the parking issue, and if you could do a more specific survey for us, convincing us of what your parking plan is. If you had 12 units in this complex, then I think we'd have more to consider here.
I was going to say, or banked parking, which means you actually go have a partnership or a relationship with someone nearby who has a parking lot. That way, it's a guaranteed parking space. Like rather than public comes and goes, and it fluctuates. But if you have an agreement with someone, which our code does allow you to do that, rather than tear down buildings, we want people to share parking. It allows you to bank that parking as counted toward your parking.
And to that end, we are in conversations with the property just to our north. That property owns both the residents to the north and the empty lot beyond it to the alley. So that property is owned, and we are in conversations to try to turn that, take that and convert at least a portion of that empty lot into parking. Obviously, I can't say that we are going to do that because we haven't even agreed to terms. We're not under contract. We're just in conversations with them at this point.
And you do own this building right now?
Yes,
You
sir.
did purchase it?
Mr. Zimmer?
Yes.
So am I saying it right, Mr. Vigneri?
Yes.
Okay, and I apologize for that.
It's very rarely. Yes.
So would you be willing to come back in 30 days and give us a plan out? Because we already know what the details are. And I know 30 days is putting you 30 days behind where you want to be, but I don't think, just me, I don't think you're going to get the approval tonight. But at the same point, if Mr. Hale can confirm this, if we deny this tonight, then that petition can't come back for at least 1 year. Is that correct, Mr. Hale?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So would you be willing to let us table this? That'll give you 30 days to work out details with them, come back in 30 days, see what you got, see what you can find out about parking at this other lot, that type of stuff. Would you agree to that?
Sure.
And I'm going to ask Mr. Zimmer if I can make a motion.
Mr. Jackson. Mr.
Yes,
Zimmer,
sir.
Yes.
I would just like to suggest that this matter, if it's tabled, then the petitioner will have to do new notices.
Continued.
No, we want a continuation. Yeah.
If it's
Yes.
continued to the next regular meeting in April, then he does not have to provide new notification.
Do
And
you
you
think
can-
you would?
You can continue it, or the petitioner can continue.
I would like to request a continuance.
So do you think 30 days is enough, or do you want 60 days?
I think 30 days is enough. Obviously, I don't control the schedule of the professionals. If
Yes.
that would be an engineer and architect. If we're within 7 days, we'll probably have that answer in 48 hours. And then I could request it to move out to 60 days. Is that something that's available?
Can we do that, Skylar?
You can. The way that works is I'd have to have something in writing for the next meeting, and you guys would have to grant it. So it'd be like another request. Does that make sense?
For another 60 days?
For
Not 30
another
days?
30 days.
Yeah, okay.
But we have done that. But I'd need something in writing, and then you guys again would be requested, and you'd have to make a decision on the continuance again.
Skylar, if I made a motion to continue it, would that, he still have to do that if he agreed to it here?
He asked for it, so he's
Okay.
already asked. It's before you guys.
Okay.
And that would put your meeting date on
April 11th.
April 11th at 6:00 here, and we'll state that again in a minute. And by that time, so say he engages the architect, hey, it's going to take a little bit longer to get that together. Say on April 10th, he would need to provide Sylvia with a letter. She'd bring it here, requesting a continuance at that point in time. And then you guys would have to consider it again. And then he'd have the 6+6.
So, and again, I would encourage you to encourage your architect to think about the layout of the floors as a residence. And then how that divides up, how those different rooms can be used as offices. I think that'll be better for you in the long run, because if it doesn't work out as an office, then it can be rented out as a residence without major, redoing of the whole inside again.
Right. Yeah, and what you see before you, I believe the main level does. I know it just shows lines, but the main level does easily divide up like that. The second level is more, this is the use.
Okay.
So, but yes, I'll talk to him about that as well.
All right, so then there's a motion to continue this petition until April 11th.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
May I just suggest that the petitioner has requested it. I think what would be appropriate would be for one of the board members to make a motion to grant the petitioner's request for continuance for our next regularly scheduled meeting on April 11th at 6 p.m.
Sorry, Ricky.
What's that?
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
All right, so Ricky, do you want to just restate?
Yeah, I'm gonna make a motion for a continuance on petition number B 100-23 of the address of 832 Pine Street to be continued on April 11th at 6 p.m. here at City Hall
At the request of the petitioner.
at the request of the petitioner.
Okay, so we have a petition. Is there a second?
I second it.
Okay, I'll call for the vote. Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Ms. Stransky,
Yes.
Ms. Van,
Yes.
Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
So ends your vote. Motion approved.
Thanks for your patience as we work through this.
Yes, so
Yeah. Thanks everyone for your comments here this evening.
so you'll need to work with Sylvia on the additional items. I really appreciate the public showing up tonight and commenting. Thank you.
You know, one other thing, you've got the COA here. Try to have the schematic drawing that you come back with, itemize and incorporate as many of these items on there as you can, even if it's just notes, so that we know that you're paying attention to this and show us what the plans are for the house in terms of renovation, not just the office layouts.
Right, and there is a chance that we will begin that exterior work so that it's not an eyesore, because that doesn't affect the interior of the building.
Okay.
Because we can't, the COA doesn't allow us to materially change the exterior.
Right.
So just so that it doesn't continue to be an eyesore, we may get our permits in place, get the windows done, get the siding repaired,
Yes.
get it painted.
Yes.
So that's completed before,
Okay.
or in motion at least.
Okay.
So
That's
windows take a while to commit, so.
okay. Well, there's going to be public comment at the end of the meeting, which is coming up in just a minute. So, all right. So, old businesses is the next item. Thank you, Mr. Vigneri.
Sure, thank you.
Approval of findings and orders for a couple of petitions here. So, Sylvia, take it away.
Mr. Hale, take it away.
Thank you. You have before you in written form, members of the board, a decision and findings of fact for petition B-103-22. The petitioner was Kenneth Smith. The owner of the property was Urban Sites of Chicago, LLC. The request was for a special exception use for property at 1603 Franklin Street. The request specifically was to allow for the operation of a used car sales lot, which is a special exception use, not a permitted use, in the zoning district that this property is located in, B2 General Commercial. There was a public hearing, you will recall, on January 10th, 2022, January 10th, 2023, in which you found findings and essentially adopted the findings as presented by your staff, and you granted the special exception use as requested, but only as subject to the following condition. The requirements of section 40.04B of the zoning ordinance are met. These requirements are the site shall not be within 100 feet of a residential district. The site shall not be within 1,000 feet of adult regulated use, and the use shall not operate after 10 p.m. So the granting of this special exception use was subject to those requirements being met. Having passed it on January 10th, 2023, an appropriate motion would be to adopt the decision and findings of fact as presented to you in written form and summarized by me just now, by a vote of adopting that decision and findings of fact.
Mr. Zimmer?
Sure.
Okay. Motion to adopt the approval of findings and orders for petition B-103-22, Kenneth Smith, for the address of 1601 Franklin Street in Michigan City, Indiana.
Is there a second?
I second.
For the vote, Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Call for the vote, Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Ms. Stransky,
Yes.
Ms. Vance,
Yes.
Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Next, you also have before you in written form the decision and findings of fact for petition number B-105-22. The petitioner was Neapolitan Michigan City, Inc. and Fadi Daoud. The owners are Hum Hum LLC and AK Investment and Consulting LLC. The request was for a special exception use for property at 150 East US Highway 20. Specifically, the petitioner was requesting a special exception to allow for the operation of a used car sales lot. The property is at 150 East US Highway 20, and we held a public hearing on January 10th, 2023. This body adopted the standards and the findings as presented by the staff in Ms. Collins' report and granted the special exception use, but subject to the following condition. The requirements of section 18.01B, off-site parking, are met. These requirements are as follows. 1 space per 400 square feet gross floor area for the sales room, and 1 space for each auto service stall in the service area. 2, the structure shall be used as a car dealership only and not as a vehicle service and repair business. The approval then was subject to those 2 conditions and the requirement of following section 18.01B of our zoning ordinance. And this body approved this special exception use on January 10th. And again, an appropriate motion this evening would be to adopt the decision and findings of fact that you have before you in written form and that I summarized just now.
Mr. Zimmer? A motion to adopt the approval of finding and orders for petition B-105-22, Fadi Daoud of 150 East US Highway 20.
Is there a second?
I second that.
I'll call for the vote. Mr. Jackson,
Yes.
Ms. Stransky,
Yes.
Ms. Vance,
Yes.
and Mr. Zimmer.
Yes.
Motion approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. Any new business this evening, Mr. York?
No, Miss Collins.
Ms. Collins?
No, there's no new business.
Okay, thank you. Now, public comment. If that gentleman was, did he leave? Okay. Any more public comment?
This is Tommy Kolovic from 1316 Ohio Street. And I got some good news. I just seen that the Boys and Girls Clubs of LaPorte County have acquired their property on Cool Spring Avenue. They're wanting to put their new 35,000 square foot facility on. So I'm hoping that we're going to have a groundbreaking there very soon. I want to thank the board for approving their variance, but I think it was back in January. We want to continue to work with them on any of their efforts. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Tommy. That's great point. Any other public comment? Okay. Then with that, if there's no other comments from the board members or Ms. Collins.
I have a comment, just a reminder, our next meeting is April 11th here and virtually at 6 p.m.
Thank you. So with that, we are adjourned.